coming. This is a introductory course on Open Meetings Act training. I am doing a series of training sessions for city staff that I came up with like about a year ago, just issues that repeatedly happen and questions that I receive quite often. And I thought, well, it's maybe long overdue for a time to review the basics of Open Meetings Act. And once you know the tools, it's really easy to comply with the act. But I want to empower staff who don't necessarily have a staff attorney assigned to the board to know the answers to the basic questions so that you can advise the boards and commissions on how to run the meeting and meet state requirements. So I'll just start. The Open Meetings Act is what the city already does. It makes sure that the actions of public bodies are open and transparent, and make sure that you have a notice, an agenda, and give people advance notice of what's going to be discussed. Hey Sarah, come on in. So public bodies, what is the definition of a public body? So it includes what you would normally think of as the City of Evanston public body, City Council, Plan Commission, but it also includes all of the other bodies that people don't necessarily know if that's covered. The Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission is covered. The subcommittees are also covered. And so when you determine quorum numbers, it's determined on the subcommittee basis versus the actual public body basis. So all of those, you have to meet the same statute requirements, take minutes, all of those things need to be still met. So what constitutes a meeting? This is probably the vast majority of the question that I get is, we don't have a quorum, is this a meeting? Do I need to take minutes? What happens if I don't have a quorum? So we'll get into that. So there are three parts to creating a meeting under the Open Meetings Act. The first prong is that you have a majority of the quorum of the public body. So I have a graph in the next couple slides that outlines, so you guys can just find which committee you staff, how many members need to have a majority of the quorum, and then you have a basic level of a meeting. Second prong is you need to discuss public business. So where this prong comes into play more often than not is situations that aren't typically a meeting. ETHS football game. Is that a meeting if a majority of the quorum of the members are there? Answer to that in short is no, that's a social function, but if they start to discuss public business, it can turn into an actual meeting. And if you gather, a lot of the case law hinges on, right now, email correspondence. Can you gather even though you're at remote locations? And the short answer is yes. You can create a meeting as soon as you hit reply all. Those members are now discussing public business. Even though there's a gap in time, they are actually creating a meeting. So we'll discuss that further on other slides, but that's the overview of how you trigger the Open Meetings Act and what is actually a meeting. So member deliberations. This is basically informal situations that may constitute a meeting, like I talked about before. Is what triggers the meeting is if you go to a social situation and it's a wedding or a fundraiser, it's not inherently a meeting, but once it starts to veer into public business, that's when you start to run into some problems. As a staff member, you won't necessarily know if these things happen. But if you hear about them saying, oh, we're going to all go tour the site that's on the Plan Commission meeting, we're going to do it together. I mean, obviously Tamir knows what to do in this situation, but that's a real life example. And then you need to advise board and commission members not to do that and what they should do. They can, so for Plan Commission, there's 9 members. They can go in groups of 2 to the site and look at it. That doesn't trigger the meeting because you're not over the majority of the quorum number. This is the chart I talked about. So if you have, the only exception to the majority of the quorum numbers is the 5-member board. The statute was amended recently to indicate that the majority of a quorum of a 5-member board is still 3, even though a majority of the quorum is 2 in normal circumstances. So how you calculate that is a quorum is, it's 51% of the body. So if it's a non-member board, 51% is 4.1 or something, but you can't have half a person, you can't have a quarter of a person, so you always round up. So the majority of that quorum number is then further divided, 51% of that, and then you would round up. So that's how you get to all those calculations. If you don't want to do it in your head, just keep a copy of that chart. So what happens if you don't have a quorum? What if you get to the meeting and you're staffing that meeting and somebody who says they're coming didn't come? And you now no longer have a quorum to actually take action on those items. You can discuss public business, but you cannot take any action on the items that are on the agenda. So you can actually convene a meeting, but it's just not advisable. What is the purpose of having a meeting if you can't take any action items? You can, if you feel like it's helpful for purposes of the discussion, to have that discussion and deliberate, but then you need to continue it to a date certain at that meeting to have any type of action taken, only discussion, and take minutes. So basic Open Meetings Act, you need to notice the meeting. A regular meeting is all of the meetings that are fixed at the beginning of the year. The committee should, all the staff members in here should make sure January 1 or December, you set all of the meetings for that year, put them up on the web, and then any meeting that's outside of that schedule is actually constitutes a special meeting. So it's anything other than a regular meeting. Yeah.
Go back to the slide before.
Sure. This one?
Yeah. No, there's no quorum. Can the public still comment?
Yes. Because you can, the members can still receive comments. We'll get into public comment quite a bit in the next couple slides. And they can still take public comment, but you should still follow your rules of procedure and public comment procedure, but the committee members can't take any action on that item. And then they should comment on that and say, we don't have a quorum present. We will receive your comments, but if you would like to come back and make sure that your comments are received by the full board, we would recommend that you do so. Yeah.
So the quorum is of the body, so when you say that, it's how many members you actually have, or how many you're supposed to have?
It's a good question. Okay, so did everybody hear her question? So basically, the rules indicate what your quorum is. So if your rules for your public, if you have no rules, let's say you have no rules, Robert's Rule of Order is the default provision for all boards and commissions. And Robert's Rule of Order indicates that your quorum is dictated based on the size of the public body, not how many vacancies you have. Let's say you have not a fully staffed board and you have 7 of 9 members. Your quorum is still determined on the full board, not on how many members have been appointed. But you can change that. The board can put into the rules that the quorum shall be determined based on the number of members appointed, and then the quorum is determined. Let's say you have the 7, then the number of the quorum would be 4 versus 5. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would also recommend to all of your boards that you make that revision, because this happens all the time. We constantly have vacancies, and then you're going to run into some quorum problems. You're constantly going to be struggling to get members there. But if you have that in your rules, maybe ZBA apply. I would consider that. So please contact the law department. We will work with you to revise your rules. Okay? Any other questions on that? No? Okay. Posting meetings. So you guys see in the elevator that we need to have those meetings posted. You also need to absolutely make sure that it's posted to the elevator, but also to the web. Since the city is an extremely active website, we need to make sure that they're done simultaneously, well, within 48 hours of the meeting. Make sure that it's on both the web and in the elevator. Agenda. So the agenda, and I know I've seen all of your agendas, various agendas that are in the elevator. Make sure that the agenda describes what is actually going to be happening. What are you discussing at the meeting? It doesn't need to be an extremely detailed explanation like they give in city council, but it needs to give enough detail to the members of the body so they know what they're discussing, and also to the members of the public. Am I interested in that topic? Should I come to that meeting? So let's, for example, Board of Animal Control. You should say, we're going to be discussing volunteer policies. That's sufficient enough to give people an explanation, but it shouldn't say we're discussing new business. and volunteers. That's not enough, just the word volunteer. What within the volunteer realm are you discussing? Okay. Let's say you have the discussion within the meeting starts to veer off into a topic that's not on the agenda, and you didn't anticipate it, or it's not a bad thing. Sometimes these things happen. They start to talk about something that deals with the comprehensive plan, but it's actually hiring a consultant. But the consultant, hiring a consultant is not on the agenda. They can talk about it, but they can't take any action on that item that's not on the agenda. Okay, and then you just put it on the next agenda. Just move it to the next one because it was not properly noticed. Time and location. So you just need to make sure that it is a typical community meeting space. It doesn't have to be here at the Civic Center. All of you know this. It could be in a school. It could be in a community center, the library, the Civic Center. But just make sure it's accessible and members of the public body feel welcome to come there. One of the cases involves a municipality where they had all these brand new members. It was a new board, and so they wanted to have more of an informal meeting. So they tried to have it at the director's house. And there was an Open Meetings Act violation because someone from the public didn't feel welcome. They were in a wheelchair, they couldn't access the house. So the Attorney General's office found that that was actually in violation. So if you have someone at the meeting talking about recordings, who pulled out their iPhone, and you're thinking, can they do that? They can do that. They can't disrupt the meeting. They can't try to get in front of our filming, but they can do that. They can take pictures, they can take audio, video. That is completely permissible. Public participation. So in your rules, I would recommend that you try to evaluate public participation in citizen comment. What are the rules that you want to implement for citizen comment? Reasonable restrictions, time limits, does it have to be on topic? Do you want it at the beginning of the meeting, end of the meeting? And also the chairperson has discretion with public comments. If it's repetitive, if the last 10 speakers have said exactly the same thing, the chairperson can say, can you please move on and discuss something that has not been previously said? Also, if it's harassing, and just general decorum issues, the chairperson can deal with that. The Attorney General's office has issued actually opinion to the city within the last month on AG's opinion. They ruled in our favor that we had handled the situation properly. A citizen with the Kendall College, former Kendall College site, we're developing it into a residential development, and the citizen for the last 3 years repeatedly stepped up to the mic and wanted to talk about that development. A tree that was being taken down, and she consistently wanted to discuss it. It was not on an agenda. It repeatedly was not on an agenda and had already been approved. The mayor had said during the meeting, please stay on an agenda item topic, 1, and 2, please keep it to a 3-minute time limit and something else. And the AG's office said that the mayor handled it appropriately. And the second one is with a different community, but it informs all of your agendas. So I can't remember the community, maybe Downers Grove, it was one of those sort of southwestern suburbs. Basically, the AG's office said that you can't require a citizen or a member of the public to give their address, that it's not relevant to the discussion. You should only say, what is your name and what topic do you wish to address? However, I called the AG's office and asked a follow-up question about committees that are like Zoning Board of Appeals, Plan Commission, where I feel like it's relevant. They said that we can ask the address, but we cannot require it. We can't say, you need to sit down because you have never given us your address. So they said, make it optional, but it is, we have certain limits, 500 feet. We want to know, it informs the members of the public body, the people that are around that area and what they feel about the development. So they had agreed with me verbally over the phone about that issue. Minutes. So you just need, these are the basic requirements, date, time, list of members. Something that I think a lot of staff members are confused about is what is the content of the minutes and what actually needs to be described. I do not need a transcript of the minutes of what absolutely every single sentence was said. It just needs to be a summary of what happened that led to the final action. So those minutes, if we were to go 5 years from now, we should be able to understand sort of the general discussion on what led to the approval of a contractor or something like that. So once they're approved in an open meeting, you have 7 days to upload it to the website. Please make sure that you have that in your calendar as a reminder. We absolutely need to hold firm on that date. And then the approval of the minutes needs to happen 30 days after the meeting, or the public body if you have one canceled meeting, it needs to go to that subsequent meeting. Closed session. So very few of you will go into a closed session that are in this room, but if you need to go into a closed session, please contact the law department. We will help you. But basically the meeting needs to be open except for 29 circumstances. It deals with employee discipline, collective bargaining agreements. If the city wants to buy, sell, lease real estate, we go into closed session to talk about purchase price or sale price, things like that. Otherwise, it needs to be open. And so can you take final action in closed session? No, they just basically reach a consensus about what they want to do, and they have to go back into open session. And let's say during the discussion, you realize that during the open session, you want to go into closed session to talk about something that's confidential. It doesn't need to be noticed on the agenda, but you have to make the motion, cite the statute section, and then go into closed session. These are just examples that I have listed. For purposes of this training, I don't think very few of you will deal with this, but like I said, let us know if you need to, because there are certain local records acts, maintenance of the actual taping that you'll need. So attendance at meetings, this is the, I'm trying to talk about what this is about. So if you have a majority of the quorum and members of the public body say, I'm a snowbird and I'm going to go away on vacation January through March, can I still attend the meeting? No, they cannot. So the remote participation, it's twofold. First, the rules need to provide for it. They need to say that yes, you can enter the meeting via Skype, telephone conference, any other type of audio, video conference, iChat I think is what it's called. And then the second prong is that it needs to be one of those statutory exceptions: personal illness, family emergency, and let's say your job takes you out of town. So only those 3 circumstances you would allow people to enter the meeting by electronic means. The default provision of the Roberts Rule of Order is that you can't. But it's a good, helpful discussion to have with your members. Do you guys want to do this? Is it helpful for you to have that flexibility? Then you would need to revise your rules, and again, the law department will help you draft that section for your rules. And I think that's it on that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
I'm not on this board anymore, but we had a member on the board that I had never even met, and I was on it for about a year and a couple months. So would she still be a board member? She never showed up to a meeting in over a year?
Well, that's a totally separate. Yes, she's formally still appointed. She needs to, if you now need to not have her appointed to the board, I would discuss it with the mayor.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, so is the purpose of like the audio conferencing for the purpose of establishing a quorum? So like if the quorum is 5, 2 people are physically present and 3 people are on the phone. Mm-hmm. Is that a quorum?
I was actually just going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, no, good question. So you need an actual physical quorum at the meeting, and then you can go to electronic means. But if you do not have a physical quorum in the room, they can't participate. So you can't build a quorum by both means.
Okay, so in the event that happened, what would happen to all the action that was taken for the meetings that where there was
where you
no
had
physical...
sort of a bifurcated procedure?
Yeah.
if this happened in the past, are you asking would it invalidate actions? Technically, it's not a meeting under the Open Meetings Act. If that certain circumstance happened, we should probably talk offline.
Okay.
Executive session, you can't participate. Everyone needs to be physically present for purposes of confidentiality. We don't want anyone to conference in and then somebody who's a developer is sitting right next to them, but you can't see them, so everybody needs to be present. And I think that's it for remote. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? So Open Meetings Act is reviewed by the Attorney General's office. So they have an arm of the AG's office called the Public Access Counselor. They review two major issues, Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act. The city has 5 Open Meetings Act issues within the last 2 years, all filed by the same complainant. And one of them have been ruled on and we're waiting for the other 4. They're all related issues. So one ruled in our favor, so we believe that probably the other ones will as well. So what happens is that the complainant has to file the complaint within 60 days of the meeting. They do it outside of that time frame. They have no dice. They can't file the complaint. Then the city has 7 days. We have to provide minutes. We have to provide the video from the meeting. We have to provide the agenda, and then just an explanation of what happened. Any other supplementary documents that the AG's office requires. And so basically the Public Access Counselor's role in that is they try to say the city handled the situation properly or take some corrective action, or we can also be fined civilly and potential criminal violations. That's it has to be extremely egregious circumstances, and I've actually never heard of it, so happy.
Recording. Some of our meetings aren't videoed because they're just,
Sure.
But we sometimes, various of us will use an audio recording just so that we can
Capture
make sure
all
that
of
we have
them.
our minutes correct and stuff like that. Do we have to preserve those as if they are part of the official record?
No.
Okay.
So once you use your audio to make minutes, then you can destroy the audio record.
Okay, just wanted to check.
It's not, but if you take a video for purposes of uploading it to the
Right.
web, an actual public record, there's an actual Local Records Act ramification for that, and I can give everybody the schedule of how long we need to keep it. And then if you go into closed session, there are procedures for that as well, because you actually need to record closed session. And you don't need to record open session. Did everybody get that? I went over the penalties. They can either go, it's a two-prong. They can either go to the Public Access Counselor, or they can actually file an action in the circuit court. And then the judge would order the injunction or mandamus for whatever order is appropriate for the situation. And this isn't a presentation on Robert's Rule of Order. If people feel like this is helpful, I can develop another presentation for that, for their chairs. Just let me know what type of need there is out there. But I just wanted to point out that Robert's Rule of Order is always the default provision. If your rules don't cover a topic, go back to Robert's Rule of Order, and that would govern the meeting. I did pass out a cheat sheet via email for Robert's Rule of Order. It's just basic motion practice. Do you need an amendment? Do you need a second? Those types of issues for the chair. And then I would just suggest for the chair that they become very familiar with Robert's Rule of Order, especially the smaller commissions. I think it's probably pretty informal, but as long as they have the main guts of how to run a meeting, then they should be fine. There's very little public participation in the Arboretum Committee or whatever. So I tried to go through that pretty quickly. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
Back to attendance, and as far as in the minutes, must all of the members or members who are absent, is that necessary?
Yes.
Number one, we do have to list who's attending in
Yes.
the minutes. Okay, so that
So
is-
both members
as
absent
well
and
absent.
Yes. That is very relevant. Also, just for purposes so you know, you were indicating that somebody's never come. So it informs the decision and of going forward. How many meetings have they come to? How many meetings have they been absent? So it just
I've never
gives
seen
you
this
some.
person. I'm not on, like I said, I'm not on that board anymore. But, when I was on there, it was over a year and I had never ever seen her. Barely had any correspondence with her
It
either.
happens.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate, but it does.
yeah.
Sarah.
Back to logistics, holidays. What constitutes a holiday? Because September is a nightmare. Because you have the Jewish holidays, which, if you are an observant Jew, is a holiday. And let me tell you, when we're trying to cram 4 meetings in 1 month, plus avoid all the council meetings and everything
Right,
else.
so for purposes of the Open Meetings Act, a holiday is a federal holiday.
Okay.
So, so whatever your religion is, if it's not a federal holiday, then that is not technically a holiday.
Okay.
However, there are certain, if you want to observe other holidays, to, be cognizant that people won't be able to do it, that's another issue.
I just wanted to.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Michelle?
Should a meeting packet be posted? Like,
I recommend that it is.
but it doesn't have.
It does not have to be, no. The meeting packet is not a necessary, only the agenda.
I have another one. Glasses on, so did it. As far as, yes, the attendance needs to be in the minutes. Is a sign-in sheet necessary? That's not necessary as long as the minutes contain it, right?
That's right, so what you could do, a sign-in sheet would be helpful if you had citizen or public participation. That is helpful, because then they could put down their name and then the line item in the agenda that they want to speak to, so that when you come to that item, you know when to call that person. It's one helpful point, yeah.
If you are sending out all of the information before, is it required to copy it again for the participants? I know have some for guests, but is it necessary to print the packet out again
No.
for them?
You mean for the attendees?
Not for the guests, but for
The actual
board
members.
commissioners, right?
No. If you gave it to them before the meeting, they can pull it up on their computers or bring an advanced copy, but no, you don't need to do that.
So for public comment, does it absolutely have to relate to an agenda item, or?
It's a good question. So City Council is currently debating this issue right now. No, it does not. Well, you can, actually, citizen comment can be listed, under the Open Meetings Act, you can say it needs to be limited to an agenda item. Now, whether or not you think that that's a good idea is gonna be up to your board. Because sometimes non-agenda item public participation comments are, about future agenda items, or they're sort of generally about whatever your board addresses. But no, the AG's office just recently ruled that it can be just on agenda items. No, you're fine. That's what this is about.
Related to attendance. There are staff that are assigned as board members. So then they need to always be counted as a member of the board, in which case included as well in a quorum.
Are there non-board members? What do you mean?
There is staff in a particular board, there is staff members.
Oh,
who-
I see what you're saying.
Let's say I'm the one who does let's say the webpage.
Uh-huh.
So one question was, do we just list this person as staff, or do we count this person as a board member?
Okay, so you're talking about Board of Animal Control, in which it's sort of a hybrid of staff but staff members can actually be board members on the board, right? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. So when the staff member is there as a board member, they get counted towards the quorum. If the staff member is there as a non-board member, you can list them as present. Usually on my minutes, I just put staff present, but that's how you would count it. Anything else? So if you have other topics that you feel like you would like an overview or a general understanding, I did Freedom of Information Act, this one's Open Meetings Act, and in the winter I'll do one on social media. The importance, because now the city's social media footprint is so large that I want employees to understand their responsibilities and record keeping and everything else. So I'll be doing that, but if you ever think of anything, please let me know. is my version of TED Talks, super nerdy. Okay, that's it. That's all I got. Thank you.